Have you ever observed how some individuals seem to possess a nearly supernatural influence over their surroundings without even uttering a word? They don't yell, they don't plead, they simply withdraw. And with that, everything begins to shift. The atmosphere changes. People begin to wonder, to chase, to feel. Now imagine yourself doing the same. Imagine no longer reacting instantly to every situation. Imagine choosing silence over instinctive responses, retreat instead of outbursts. What do you suppose would happen? That's precisely the point. When you stop being constantly accessible, emotionally, physically, mentally, the world around you begins to panic. Why? Because they're accustomed to managing you through your reactions, your impulses, your predictability. But the moment you choose to step back, everything changes. And suddenly, those who believed they understood, you realize they didn't know you at all. Accustomed to managing you through your reactions, your impulses, your predictability. But the moment you choose to step back, everything changes. And suddenly, those who believed they understood, you realize they didn't know you at all. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves." So reflect on this. When you become inaccessible, who's the one that panics? Who grows agitated? Who tries to provoke you just to draw some emotion out of you? That tells you more about them than it ever does about you. More importantly, it reveals just how much control over your emotions you've unknowingly handed over. You keep giving parts of yourself just to keep peace, to avoid rejection, to hold on to people who were never truly present for you. Each time you say yes against your will, every rushed reply, every emotional reaction, you lose fragments of your energy. And by the end of it all, what's left behind? Exhaustion, disappointment, a hollow emptiness you can't quite explain. And I'll tell you why. Because you've made yourself available to those who don't even deserve a moment of your silence. But understand this, it's not about rejecting the world. It's about finally choosing yourself. It's about practicing what Jung described as individuation, the process of becoming whole, authentic, and true to who you are. And this journey starts when you realize that silence, when intentional, is more powerful than 1,000 explanations. Withdrawing, when done with awareness, not avoidance, isn't weakness, it's strength. So now I ask you, how long will you let others steer your emotions? How much longer will you allow yourself to be triggered like a puppet every time someone touches a wound? Maybe it's time to cut the strings, to step back, to become a mystery, because the moment you stop being available, everything begins to change. Since childhood, you were conditioned to always be present, to respond quickly, to please, to say yes, even when your heart screamed no. You were taught that your worth depended on how available you were to others. But let me share a truth few dare to say aloud. Being endlessly available is not a strength, it's a trap. And as long as you believe that your constant accessibility is a virtue, you will continue to be used, depleted, and discarded the moment your usefulness fades. Why? Because predictability invites manipulation. The more available you are, the more you become a tool. People begin to treat you like an emotional vending machine, pressing your buttons for comfort, attention, or validation, only to put you back on the shelf once their needs are met. But here's the problem, you don't see this happening. You live under the illusion that showing up for everyone will make someone show up for you, but that's not how it works. Carl Jung spoke of the persona, the mask we wear to gain acceptance, love, recognition, and it's that very mask that keeps you overly accessible. You pretend you're fine while you're drowning. You reply to messages while drained. You explain yourself, defend yourself, as if the world is owed an explanation. But the truth? The more you place yourself on other people's stage, the more you vanish from your own. Constant availability is a quiet form of self-abandonment. It's a disguised need for approval, a way to avoid rejection, a desperate attempt to shape how others see you. But this control comes with a cost, and that cost is your peace. Your energy is not infinite, and every time you give it away like it is, you chip away at your own center. The ones who expect you to always be there don't necessarily value you. They value the service you provide, the validation, the attention, the comfort. But the moment you set boundaries, the moment you stop reacting, they shift. They accuse you, question you, call you distant. It's not that you changed, it's that you're no longer serving their emotional convenience. And here lies one of the hardest truths to accept. The more constantly available you are, the less others value you, because anything that's always within reach becomes emotionally disposable. Nobody respects what they don't have to earn. No one truly cherishes what's endlessly offered. So pause for a moment and reflect. Who actually deserves your time? Who truly earns your attention, your presence, your listening? Or maybe the better question is, who genuinely deserves your absence? But before you answer, there's something essential to grasp. Why do we react so impulsively? Why do we give in so easily? Why does it feel like we have to respond, explain, justify? Carl Jung offered a powerful answer: psychic energy. Your energy is your most vital currency. If you don't learn to protect it, others will use it against you. Every time you react out of habit, defending yourself against unworthy criticism, jumping into arguments just to prove a point, bending over backward for people who take you for granted, you're draining that energy. And Jung was clear about this. What you resist persists. The more emotionally reactive you are, the more you remain entangled in those same cycles. The people who live in a constant state of exhaustion aren't weak. They're simply misdirected. And here's what that leads to: vulnerability. When you're drained, you're exposed. You become easy to manipulate, easier to control. Opportunists can sense it. They recognize when you're always trying to fix, respond, or be the emotional caretaker, and they use it. Jung believed that a healthy psyche is one that knows how to contain energy. That means knowing when to say no without guilt, when to stay silent without shame, and when to pause instead of reacting. Because true power isn't in the response, it's in the choice to respond only when it truly matters. How many nights have you lost sleep replaying a conversation that didn't end the way you wanted? How often do you find yourself obsessing over what you should have said? Or worse, trying to make sense of why someone treated you with disregard? That's psychic energy, being drained into a void. You're keeping ghosts alive that should have been laid to rest long ago. You're feeding toxic dynamics that only persist because you continue to fuel them with your reactions. Think of psychic energy like a force field. When it's protected, it creates presence. You walk into a space and people feel your energy without a word. But when that energy is scattered, unmanaged, you become reactive, invisible, fragile. And the truth is, the world doesn't go easy on those who give themselves away too freely. Start noticing your own triggers. What instantly makes you respond without thinking? What shakes your center the fastest? These are the exact places where your energy leaks. And those leaks are the areas you must begin to heal. Not to become cold, not to grow indifferent, but to become selective, to claim sovereignty over your inner world. And here we reach one of Jung's most profound teachings. When you preserve your energy, you dismantle the projections that others place on you. And that's precisely what unsettles people. Because now we enter the realm of silent manipulation, the kind that doesn't shout or demand, but pulls your strings through guilt, expectations, and emotional traps. And in the next part, we'll look even closer at how opportunistic people feed on your emotional availability and how your silence, your boundaries, your retreat can collapse the entire game they've been playing. Get ready, because you're about to recognize the faces of those who've been quietly draining your soul. You think you're in control. You believe that your reactions are conscious, intentional choices. But the truth is far more unsettling. Most of what you feel and express is deeply programmed. And those who understand that, they can manipulate you with ease. People who are emotionally opportunistic don't need to yell, threaten, or force their way in. All they have to do is tap into the emotional triggers you've left wide open, and you react every time. Carl Jung called this projection, a psychological mechanism where people place onto others what they refuse to confront within themselves. But here's what's often overlooked. While others project onto you, you become the canvas for those projections. And the more emotionally accessible you are, the more space you give them to paint their false narratives. You know that friend who only contacts you during a crisis, that partner who depends on you to save the day, that person who flatters you, but only when you're serving their needs. That's no accident. They're not engaging with you, they're engaging with the idea of you, the role you've silently agreed to play. And why do you keep playing along? Because you fear disappointment, you fear being unloved, you fear abandonment. But here's the twist. The most powerful form of manipulation isn't loud, it's quiet guilt. It lives in those moments when you feel obligated to respond, to help, to understand, even when it's costing you your sanity. And this is the critical point. The manipulator doesn't have to hold you down. They just need you to keep reacting the same way. But once you stop, once you begin saying no, once you choose silence instead of explanation, distance instead of defense, their illusion shatters. The version of you they relied on vanishes, and that deeply unsettles them because now they're forced to look inward. And the painful truth? Most people aren't ready for that. Your unavailability becomes a threat, not because you've done something wrong, but because it reflects the emptiness they've been avoiding all along. Your silence exposes the noise inside them, and so they lash out, they criticize, they stir emotional drama, not because you're at fault, but because you stopped serving as their convenient mirror. Carl Jung once said, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." When you withdraw, when you stop feeding the cycle, something unsettling happens. The shadow in others begins to surface, and for those who've used you as an emotional escape, that's unbearable. But what about you? Are you prepared to face the discomfort of being misunderstood, of being rejected or even attacked simply for choosing to protect your own energy? Are you ready to sit through the silence that follows the breaking of old patterns? Because it's in that silence that a new form of power quietly begins to rise. And that's what we're stepping into now. The world today is deafening. Everyone wants to be heard, to respond fast, to win empty arguments and prove a point, even if it costs them their peace. But there exists a kind of power that very few people understand, and even fewer master. The power of silence. Not silence rooted in fear or passivity, but conscious, precise, deeply aware silence. A silence that doesn't mean absence, but rather a magnified presence. Jung saw silence not as a void, but as a fertile space for profound transformation. When you stop reacting, you begin to observe, and through observation, you begin to see what was always there but hidden. Patterns, emotional traps, cycles of self-sabotage. Silence brings clarity, and clarity threatens those who survive by confusing you. Have you noticed how some people get visibly uncomfortable when you don't reply, when you don't explain yourself, when you simply step away? It's not because they miss you, it's because your silence robs them of their narrative control. As long as you speak, you're still in their game. But when you go quiet, the rules change. And that terrifies those who rely on your reactions. Real silence isn't about being quiet. It's about owning your energy. It's the refusal to be dragged into battles that only deplete you. It's choosing not to let someone else dictate your emotional state. Jung believed that the process of becoming who you truly are, individuation, requires that distance, because it's only in the silence that you finally hear your own voice without interference. But don't be mistaken, silence comes with a cost. It will create distance between you and those who only valued you for the part you played in their lives. It will confuse the ones who only knew how to relate to the version of you they imagined, not the one you truly are. It will make you seem cold, distant, maybe even arrogant, but that reaction says more about them than it does about you. They never cared to engage with your depth, only your availability. They never wanted your truth, just your usefulness. And here lies a hard but liberating truth. The more you grow, the more selective you become with your words, because now you understand every sentence you speak is an investment of energy, and not everyone deserves access to that energy. Not everyone is worthy of your inner world. Sometimes silence isn't a withdrawal. Sometimes it's sovereignty. It's the language of those who no longer need to prove anything to anyone. And yes, silence is uncomfortable. Why? Because it forces others to face their own thoughts, their own noise, their own shadows. And that kind of reflection can be more threatening than any words you could ever say. You don't need to justify your absence. Your absence explains itself. And those who are rattled by your silence often reveal how dependent they were on your emotional chaos to feel in control of their own lives. But here's what matters most. The most powerful kind of silence isn't the one that disrupts others. It's the silence that rebuilds you from the inside out. It's the silence that reconnects you with something far deeper than external validation. It's in that still, quiet space, free from demands, free from roles, that you begin to restore your energy and reconnect with who you are at your core. And this is exactly what we're going to explore next, because it's not enough to simply mute the noise outside. You have to relearn how to use your energy intentionally, to know where it belongs, where it lingers, and most importantly, where it should never go again. It's time to be selective with your soul. If you're in the middle of reclaiming your energy and drawing boundaries, you'll deeply resonate with what I've written in my book, Beyond the Shadow. It unpacks Jung's most powerful teachings and gives you practical tools to protect your energy, set clear limits, and reconnect with your real self. The link is pinned in the comments. But remember, none of this knowledge matters if it stays theoretical. It means nothing if, in practice, you still say yes when you want to say no, if you still reply to draining messages, engage in pointless conversations, and cling to relationships that only exist out of habit. Awareness without action becomes just another way to lie to yourself. Real change begins when you make the firm decision to become selective, not from bitterness but from emotional discipline. Conscious unavailability isn't arrogance. It's not indifference. It's not coldness. It's simply choosing not to be accessible to anyone, anytime, for any reason. It's deciding to own your time, your energy, your peace. And this begins with the small things. Not responding instantly, taking a breath before replying, walking away from chaos instead of being dragged into it, turning off your phone without guilt, saying not today, saying I'm not interested, saying I won't engage. But most importantly, you don't need to explain your absence. You don't have to defend your silence. You owe no one an explanation except yourself. And for many people, that's unforgivable, because when you stop explaining, you take away their ability to keep you trapped inside their emotional narratives, where you're always the helpful one, the available one, the one who can be counted on to self-abandon. Carl Jung understood that every true path of individuation, of becoming your real whole self, requires a period of isolation. But this isn't a lonely, depressing kind of isolation. It's sacred. It's a quiet retreat inward, a time to hear your own voice without the world constantly talking over it. This is where you begin to rebuild your identity, not based on how others see you, but from a place deep within your own center. Want to know a powerful way to measure your personal growth? Watch who begins to pull away when you become more reserved. Watch who tries to trigger you the moment you stop reacting. Watch who claims you've changed when you finally start protecting your peace. These aren't signs that you've lost your way. They're signs that you're finally walking your own. At first, being unavailable will feel uncomfortable. You'll feel guilty. You'll wonder if you're being selfish. People will say, you've become cold, detached, too harsh. But that discomfort is part of the process, part of shedding an identity that was built to keep others happy, not to keep you whole. You've been trained to put yourself second, so of course it feels unnatural to finally choose yourself. But remember, every person who complains about the new you is someone who benefited from the old one. Conscious unavailability is the foundation of self-determination. When you say no to the noise of the world, you're saying yes to your truth. When you step away from toxicity, you're affirming that your peace is worth more than a false connection. When you stop explaining yourself, you don't become distant, you become respected, even if only by a few. But not everyone will handle this version of you well, because your absence exposes their wounds. Your silence reveals how dependent they were on your chaos, and that's when the rupture happens. The break, the distance, the loneliness. But here's the truth, you're not losing anything. You're liberating yourself. And what follows that break? What grows out of the silence? A rebirth. A life where you're no longer available for emotional scraps, for games, for connections built on need rather than respect. You now welcome only what aligns with your peace, your truth, your wholeness. And if you've listened this far, it means that somewhere deep inside, you're ready to be misunderstood, to be alone, to walk a path not many dare to take, because you've realized something. Being loved means nothing if it costs you yourself. And true self-love begins the moment you decide, I choose me. So now I ask you, are you ready to be misunderstood, rejected, even hated, if that's what it takes to protect your inner freedom? If this message touched something in you, drop it in the comments. I choose my peace. Let's see who's really ready for this transformation. And remember, keep watching. The next video matters more than you realize. See you there.